All right, hello everyone. Welcome back for another pre-workshop video to get you started in working with files in R. The purpose of this video is going to demonstrate how to work with some of the workshop files that you've now hopefully downloaded from the workshop website. If you've not done so, why don't you hit the pause button, go download those files, and then come back and join us again. I've downloaded the workshop data in a previous video, and so I'm going to work with those. So the first thing that I want to show you how to do is how to open an existing file from RStudio. In order to do that, I'm going to use it just like any other program. I'm on a Windows PC, so I've got an attached menu here up at the top. If you're on a Mac, these menus are going to be detached, but they'll be anchored to the top of your actual desktop. Perhaps likewise for Linux systems. So I'm going to go ahead and click File, and I'm going to open a file. I'm just going to browse to the folder where I've downloaded that, and I'm going to open the data for _r4noms project file. This is a new thing that we're trying out this year to try and make file management a little easier for you. I'll hit open and confirm. Okay, great. Now you should notice a couple things have happened there when I opened up the project file. First of all, that untitled document went away from my workspace. And then on the refresh, I got a whole bunch of different files down here in the bottom right in my file browser. What's happened here is that the project file that I opened is kind of like an organizational file for R. Right? And so it tells R where to look for various other files. Now, I can see that I've got a bunch of files in my file browser that end with .r. If you're in the introductory workshop, the code for those workshops is in this introductory and introductory2.r files. Of course, the code for the intermediate workshop is there in the intermediate.r file. Of course, that doesn't mean anything to any of us just yet. What I'm going to do now is just grab one of those. I'll click on it, and it should open automatically wherever your source editor is in R. And so now I've got that loaded up, and I can see I've opened intermediate in this case, and I've got the title of the document and a bunch of code. This is code that's just extracted straight out of the website tutorials that we're using to host some of the content for this workshop. And so the idea here is that once you've done some of the necessary legwork, you should be able to, in theory, run all of this code from top to bottom. Stay tuned. We'll post some common errors that folks have had. None of it's a big deal. Most of it's related to management of packages. We'll talk about packages in another video coming up soon. So this is my code file, my source file, if you like, or my script. That's going to contain all of the commands that I'm going to use in order to run code in R. Whenever I run any of that code, it's going to get sent to my console. For me, that's in the top right. If your RStudio session doesn't look like this and you want it to, check out the video on RStudio Basics. Now I have all my code over here on the left. And if I minimize my file browser, I can have a full screen console. If you're really ambitious and you'd like to try to run some code, I'd say the first one to start with, if you haven't watched the video on installing packages, would be line 8 here. This line of code is going to read some data from a CSV formatted file inside of a folder called data. That folder, if I look at my file browser, is contained within the workshop data folder. And because I've opened this R project, it knows that if it's looking for data, this is where it should point. Those data that I'm looking for are contained within this CSV. These are some really cool data from the Taseki-Dippin data set that folks have provided in years past. And every year we pick a new state and work or province, and we work with the data from that region. in 2020, we'll be working with the Minnesota data, which is really exciting because it's a monster of a data set. Now, I don't want you to try to read anything in from here. I want you to hard code these data reads as I've shown, because these really start to get at some of the best practices in reproducible programming. So that's the file I'm going to read in. And when I do read it in, it will show up over here in my global environment. Your global environment is basically your working memory for R. That's where it's going to keep track of all of the virtual objects that we'll make. And now, so what it'll do is it'll take the contents of Minnesota and read those into R and store them in a temporary place. It won't actually change the file itself unless we tell it to. So to wrap this video up really quickly, now I'm going to go ahead and run this line of code that will tell R to look in the folder data for the Minnesota CSV. To do that, you can click the Run button, or as you see shown there, you can use the speed key combination Control and Enter. That's what I like to do. It takes just a second for the data to read in. Again, it's a very large data set with some 400,000 rows, and you see that it immediately pops up down in my environment. I can click on that to see what it's all about. We'll talk about what this stuff means during the workshop. And I can even click on the little data table symbol over here to have that drawn up in my data viewer. And now I can work with this data set much like I might in Microsoft Excel or spreadsheets or any other spreadsheet application. For example, I could filter and choose just one water body. And it will select those for me. I could also sort if I'd like to. None of this changes any of the underlying data in the file that we read in. Any changes to those data happen only in R unless we tell the program to make changes otherwise. You'll notice that there are many more files included inside of the data folder. One of these files, physical, contains limnological data from Otsego Lake, New York, collected by personnel and students at the field station that I work at with others right here in Cooperstown. The other files are a collection of GIS files that make up the shape file for the boundary of Minnesota. We'll be working with those in the intermediate session, not in the introductory session. That should give you a very brief overview of the files that you have in the workshop data folder, the purpose of those files, and how to interact with them. Coming up, we'll try to get you started with some basic R commands and other information that should be helpful getting ready for this workshop or working on your own afterwards.